Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with Kansas City-based jazz saxophonist Herschel McWilliams. Born and raised in Kansas City, Kansas, he is the son of musicians. His father is a drummer and his mother is a pianist, and was introduced to many musical influences at an early age. He started learning piano at the age of 8 and the alto sax at 10. He opened up about recordings on the horizon, being a part of the great Kansas City jazz scene in 2019. His blog, Live Jazz KC, and how his wife and children inspire him, and so much more. Please get to know Herschel and dig this interview, my friends. Okay, Herschel, thank you for taking a minute out for Neon Jazz. I appreciate it.
No problem.
So I guess the first thing that I always try to establish with local musicians, because it's such a big thing and it's your calling card, and it's what the world expects, is what CDs, what projects, anything in the works, any projects that those listeners out there are interested in the music, because you play so often live. How can they get a hold of what you're doing, or what are you doing now?
I'm busy in a lot of ways. Musically speaking, I've been working on some writing and putting together a recording project here late this year. Ideally is my timeline. Life in general keeps me busy enough as it is, but aside from playing and being a family man and having a full-time day gig, you might say, is working on other projects that I have going related to the jazz scene, in terms of doing my piece to help promote what's going on too.
Right on. Well, I guess in conjunction with that, give me an idea of what you are doing with, what's the day job, what are you doing right now, and what are you doing as far as like gigs, at regularity, at certain venues? What's going on with that with the Kansas City scene?
Yeah, so I have some regular gigs downtown at the Garment House, at Hush, at 10th and Broadway, regular gigs at places like the Phoenix, as well as a new venue at 18th and Vine, Soiree Steak and Oyster House, which is right there between Paseo and Vine on 18th Street in the Jazz District. It just opened, and playing fairly regularly there, and also as well as coordinating and scheduling the entertainment for that place.
Let's get an idea of the beginnings of your life and where all of this began for you. You were a lifelong resident of the Kansas City area, born and raised in KCK. The son of musicians, father is a drummer, mother is a pianist, and you were introduced to music at a very early age. So give me an idea of what your childhood was like, how you got into music, and what instruments, and how it all began.
Yeah, you kind of summed up a lot of it. My dad is a drummer, and my mom is a piano player and singer. My dad, of course, sings as well. And when I was born, my mom was pregnant with me, as a matter of fact. They had a rock band, and they were playing out at the bars in the late 70s, doing the bar scene for rock gigs, when live music was a pretty big thing at the clubs then, and that was their means of income. They were full-time musicians for a while. My mom has since become a nurse and retired from nursing, but Dad took a job with some local city governments for years and years. That's what my dad did, and my mom played in the band with him for quite some time. So I was introduced to music, right away. I mean, I suppose literally, and a wide range of music. Not so much jazz, I wouldn't say, as just all of the things that were popular at the time. When you're playing those gigs, we got guys. I think back to what we listened to in the car with my parents, and my dad is a big Todd Rundgren fan, and my mom's a big, Beatles and Eric Clapton fan. My dad likes Chicago and, Gino Vanelli. And I mean, just a wide range of music that I was exposed to. And then, of course, always having a piano and a drum set at the house was a good introduction into just being musical in general. And I started learning how to play drums at maybe 7, 8 years old. My dad would sit me down and teach me how to play a beat, and I always had a good time and enjoyed it. But as soon as I had the opportunity to join the band in school, drums was not my choice of instrument. I wanted to play saxophone from the first time I saw a kid walking into school with one. And I remember his name was Mike Thompson, actually. He was a fifth grader when I was a fourth grader. I said, whoa, that looks like a really cool instrument. I think it was mostly because I thought Mike Thompson was a cool kid. That's what I wanted to do. And my dad looked at me kind of cross-eyed and said, "What? Why don't you want to play drums?" And I thought to myself, I just don't, right? And so some things we do. And my mom said, "Look, you want to play saxophone? Let's go get you a saxophone." And that was the beginning of that. Before, as I got into school. And I was lucky enough to have some incredible teachers along the way in the public schools. Then in Kansas City, Kansas, in the Turner School District where I started, we had a great elementary school band director at the time who was a clarinet player. And my dad lived next door to the high school, so I could have some extra time to spend with him doing lessons after school once in a while. And then, he was a good influence on me in terms of being available as a teacher. And then, later on in middle school and high school, my mom moved to Shawnee, and I had some great teachers there. My high school band director is probably my biggest influence in that regard. Her name is Penny Sneed, and she was at Shawnee Mission North at the time, and now she's at Northwest, and she's co-teaching at Northwest with Doug Talley, who was another, teacher I had along the way. So, there's a lot of things, but I've just been blessed with having a lot of good influences and people around me to look up to in terms of educators and other musicians.
What about jazz music? What albums, what musicians were really getting you going in the beginning?
Great question. My stepdad, looking back now, was probably had the coolest taste in music now. As I go back, and I remember going through CDs and playing CDs. And I found one, I was in the 7th grade, and I stumbled upon a CD, which at the time was a fairly new thing anyway, but it was the Weather Report Heavy Weather album. I was like, what's this? And I put it in, and my mind was totally blown. The first saxophone player I remember listening to, and that was Wayne Shorter, but the whole band just was like, whoa. And I remember listening to different tunes and going, this is amazing, and I just didn't know how to explain it. And then I connected it back to, man, my dad used to play Chick Corea stuff, and so now I remember after I realized what I was listening to, I thought back to myself, oh man, my dad used to listen to Liza Feather and all these cool Chick Corea's Hark albums, and I wasn't really aware, and I figured it out stumbling upon the Weather Report. And then, so from there, it kind of took me in a direction of figuring out what it was. And I remember my mom at that point, she also had a Harry Connick Jr. Big band album. And I was in the 7th grade, and I listened to that and heard the big band jazz, and I heard the saxophones, and I was like, whoa, this is definitely something I like. And that's when I joined the middle school jazz band. And because of that, because of listening to that album, it was like the Red Light, Blue Light album, I think, from Harry Connick Jr. And from that point, it just sort of started to snowball. And I think the next thing I started finding was I went out and bought a Charlie Parker CD because someone told me that was the guy you should listen to. And I remember my grandmother telling me I should get a Boots Randolph's thing. Well, I never bought one. I still have never bought one. So I just started listening to things and figuring out what it was I like to listen to. And that, as time goes by, that progresses and our influences change. But I was early on, that was a big thing. And the next, as a freshman in high school, I think the biggest thing for me was the Joshua Redman album. I think Mood Swing, I think was the name of that album, that I heard as a maybe a freshman in high school, and I was like, whoa. And it opened my eyes in a different way.
I know you were groomed with music with parents and you were around it. It's almost just kind of like asking somebody what it's like to be blind when they've never seen before. So the only reality has been music for you. But my question is, when you were growing up or when you started getting into it, did you know that was going to be your career, or did you have other career aspirations?
Oh, I always thought I wanted to be a band director from the time I could really start thinking about what I wanted to do. I thought maybe being a high school band director would be just the pinnacle of career choices, and because I had such a great one, and I was around so many people, and quite frankly, to that end, there were at Shine North, there were a number of us in her band program under Penny Sneed that went the direction of music education and studied music at a collegiate level. But as time goes by, I didn't become a band director, and I went in a different direction, and always kept music in my life as a passion and something I enjoy. Early in my 20s, I started to work at a full-time gig, and I started and kind of made that my focus for a number of years, and really playing took a back seat to some degree, just so I could start myself on a path to, of having a career of some kind and being able to support my music might be the best way to say it.
So when you did start out on the stage, when you did start gigging and you got up there in front of the lights and the crowds, does it feel natural? Is it an extension of who you are? Do you get nervous? How do you feel on stage?
I think if someone says they don't get nervous at some level every single time that they put their horn in front of somebody, then they're lying a little bit. But by and large, no, I wouldn't say overly nervous or even feel it's more excitement. I think it's more exciting just to know that you're going to do something that you enjoy, and that really, at the end of the day, I just hope that somebody enjoys it as much as I do. And if they do, I'm ecstatic.
What was one of the most memorable first gigs you had? Where were you at? What happened? Kind of walk me down that.
My most memorable first gig, well, I can tell you that the first, I'll call it gig, that I ever did, was the summer after I graduated high school. I got a call from a guy, and I remember thinking to myself, I wonder how the heck this guy even knows I exist. And I didn't know him too well, and they needed me to come play saxophone with their big band, and it was just a community big band, and to me it was a huge deal because I got called to play with the band, and they were playing down at night in Vine at the Club Mardi Gras, which is now I think half caved in, and they're rebuilding some things there. But there was a club there, an old bar, Club Mardi Gras, at the corner of 19th and Vine, and this big band was going to go play. I mean, I was excited. It was my first time going out and doing a gig, and so that was my first, and I was certainly more nervous there. I'm sure I was walking a little stiff and moving quick, because that was a big deal. And I got my first real experience of playing with people whom I considered at the time to be gigging musicians. And, looking back, it's a really great community band that still to this day, and it was a really memorable experience for me because it was my first call I'd ever gotten, and as a matter of fact, another big part of that was it was the first time I'd taken my brand new saxophone that I just bought for myself to play in college out on any kind of public performance. So it was a big day for me to take my new shiny new saxophone out and play with a band.
Talk to me a little bit about the Kansas City scene. The outside world looks in, and they always know about this history. There's so many ghosts. There's so many elements of this town being one of the four cradles. But there's a scene right now, and without being too subjective, it's doing pretty well from what I can see. Being somebody that spends, the music of this town and covering it, I can tell there's a lot that's happening. I know that there's a desire for, bigger crowds and better money and all of that. But at the end of the day, the reality is that clubs keep opening up. Musicians are playing at a regular clip. So what is your take, not only from that perspective of what's going on, but like from a musician standpoint, the camaraderie, the coming together? How do you see Kansas City's music or jazz scene in 2019?
I think you summarized it fairly well so far. I mean, I think it's certainly got a lot of really great things going for it right now. I'm looking at today, on a Thursday in June, there are, 13 gigs where you can go hear live jazz in Kansas City tonight. 13 separate scheduled performances of some kind at different venues that you can go hear. So you figure 13 times the number of people that are going to be performing in them. That's dozens of musicians working, playing jazz in this city. And this is just a Thursday night. And this is a small segment compared to what you see even on Fridays and Saturdays. It grows even more. But there's a lot of guys working, which is great. And, while I never claimed to be a full-time musician, and I would never put myself in that category in this town, there's a lot of guys who are working every day that they want to be. I know there's a couple of guys that I talk to that say that no matter what, they don't ever work on this day because that's their family day, and they just don't take gigs. I think they kind of have to do that because otherwise they'd be working 7 days a week, and which is a great thing. And I hope that it continues to grow. But as I see Kansas City right now, having been born and raised here, and remember coming up, going to the jam sessions down in the plaza at the Fedora, 210 at Fedora with Tommy Ruskin and those guys. There was a handful of places to go listen to jazz music, not to the extent we have now. We really have a great array of venues for all facets of the music, and not to say, from the standards to the very creative, improvised musicians that are here in this town right now as well.
So the one thing I always hear from musicians that have had any experience with some of the older guard musicians, like Ahmad Al-Addin, Lonnie McFadden, Jay McShann, a lot of those older cats, there's always been kind of this tinge and this notion that they want to continue the torch. They want to take what they knew from their elders and what they even experienced themselves and pass it on to the new generation. What's this generation that's around your age, your experience level, really in the middle of a scene that you're not going to be able to have clear hindsight until maybe 10, 20 years from now about what is going on and what experience you have? What are you seeing as your obligation to the cats that are coming out of, say, Kansas City, Kansas Community College, UMKC, or coming in from out of town? Because a lot of people are coming to Kansas City. This used to be a springboard, but it's now a destination. What do you see your obligation as a seasoned jazz cat in this town for younger people that are coming in?
Our obligation with the guys my age, and I think it's just to do whatever we individually think serves the best, greater purpose. And for me, there's guys. I'll back up. There's guys who are great educators and teachers in that world, and there's guys who are mentors in terms of the gig mentors, the guys that you go and you play gigs with some older guys and you sort of learn how to be a pro in that regard. And then there's guys who, hit all different holes. And personally, I want to think that my stamp on this whole thing, when it's all done, certainly I want to support any of the young guys coming up. I want to make sure they have a place to play and that they have the opportunities that we had, even at a smaller level back then, to get out and play in public and meet these guys, which I think they're doing. I think they're doing great. And while doing that, also continue to lift the scene up in a way that, puts more eyeballs on what we have going on every day, that creates awareness for, all the great things we do have in Kansas City, all the great musicians and venues and opportunities to play that we have so that we can sustain them. And I think that, if we keep that as a focus, as well as keep grooming the musicians in terms of how we want to, keep moving it forward, it's going to stay in the direction it's going, which certainly seems positive.
Absolutely. So at this point, let's just generically ask you this. How do you feel about your career, where you're at, where you're going, and maybe what you want to do as time goes forward with this jazz life you have and in Kansas City?
My goals for myself, and they've sort of shifted and adapted over time. And right now, I would say that mainly I want to be an advocate for musicians in general, which, is why I'm working on the projects I have with Live Jazz KC, I want to be able to help connect the musicians and the venues and the listeners, and so that we all have these resources and really help to prop the scene up, and the old saying of the rising tide floats all boats, then I want to help rise the tide a little bit of the city. And that's ultimately, I want people to look back and go, yeah, he's a saxophone player, and that's great. And there's lots of those, but there's not a lot of people that, I can look back and go, man, that person left their mark on what's on the city in this way, not from playing, but because they did their best to elevate the scene as a whole.
So you did touch on it, so let's talk about JazzKCcom, a jazz blog that's going to have a comprehensive community jazz calendar. It's going to have articles, and personally, I have submitted one to you on the great Alvin Queen, and Ben Leifer wrote a great revealing article about, musicianship and being a musician in the Kansas City scene, and there's a lot that's starting. Talk to me about this venture.
Yeah, so LiveJazzKC.com was just a result of timing, I suppose. There was a jazz calendar here in Kansas City that was up and running for quite some time. It was very good, a lot of information, and then recently was made inoperable, I guess you might say. The plug was pulled, and for lots of reasons that at this point don't matter so much, but it was a hole in the market that I felt needed to be filled, because there was sort of that resource there before, to a degree, that when that hole became available, I wanted to fill this hole in a way where not only do we have a single source, because I think that jazz is such a big part of our brand in Kansas City. I mean, people talk about Kansas City. What's the first thing they talk about? Well, probably barbecue. But what's the second thing they talk about in a lot of cases? Maybe the Royals, but right?
Yeah.
So our brand is jazz and barbecue. So, and when we talk about that in terms of tourism, in terms of how, people want to know, not just tourists, but residents and listeners and everyone alike, where's the place we can get information and find out what's going on in terms of the jazz scene? Well, having a single source at LiveJazzKC.com as a resource for a calendar was my main focus. And having a place that could aggregate this information, collect it from musicians, and then daily have a perpetual account online available, it was the first part. And I've taken that to another level with the corresponding Facebook page that we do a daily calendar. Every day it's posted with that day's particular gigs. If you want to know where to go find jazz in Kansas City, on Thursday, June 20th, 2019, you look at Live Jazz KC on Facebook, and you'll find it. Every day there's a new listed. But then the website has, kind of shifted a little bit too. Now, aside from having just the calendar, which is a big piece, I also wanted to add some resources for venues, like a list of venues that's back to the venue itself. It's certainly helpful for people coming in and knowing where to go, and maybe being able, and with their addresses and how to find them. And I also have started to add some artist spotlights to the website, where every month we have artist spotlights where we have 3 Kansas City jazz musicians and a little bit about them, spotlight who we have here in town. And we've added some local album releases to the website to get information about our local jazz scene in terms of the albums that are out there and available. And by no means do I have all of the ones that we could have listed, but I would like to. So I'm getting them up as fast as I can and adding them. So I encourage anybody, if they have, they're listening now, then please reach out, give me the information. I'd love to list it for you and have this out there for people to see. Because when people come to this site, I want them to see not only where you can listen and go here, but I want them to learn a little bit about the people that are here. Check out their albums, buy their albums. I include links, and this isn't an income stream for me. It's just something I want out there for the greater good, ultimately. So we list the gigs, and we have jam session listings, and just try to have a resource for jazz as well in the city, as well as curating some events. And we're working towards, starting to curate some events under the Live JazzKC brand to spotlight certain things throughout the year on special occasions. I'll see where it takes us. My hope is that it gains some traction, which it certainly has been, with musicians and listeners. And I'm proud of the work that's been done so far. But I thank you very much for contributing what you've contributed with the interview. We had a great album review, and like you said, Ben's piece was fantastic. I've got some others coming. I've got a submission from Adam Larson, who just recently moved here from New York City. Kind of talking about why he chose Kansas City. What was the reason? Why did he choose to move here? So it's a lot of great content. So I encourage you to check it out. If you're not from Kansas City, please look at it and just see what we're all about.
One of the things as an artist is all the influences and all the pieces of your life are a big part of it. You're married, you have 4 kids. Talk to me a little bit about how influential your family life is on your art and how that affects it.
Oh man, great question. And I'm not sure I've never really thought about that. I mean, influential, my family is on the art. I'm lucky, I do have 4 children, and I've been married for 14 years, and my wife has never told me to stop playing or not to practice, most of the time anyway. And she's very supportive of me, going out and doing my gigs and playing in public. I've been really blessed in that regard, because I married a gal that isn't a musician, who all while she did play in the band in school, I think for a year or two, maybe even not even a year, but she's still understanding of what it means to me, and I'm grateful for that. My kids are amazingly gifted in terms of their creativity, and we'll see if that can translate into the music at some point, but they're all pretty young still. They're 8 all the way down to 10 months old.
Let me ask you this. Why do you love jazz?
I don't know that I even have an answer for that other than I just do. I mean, people look at me funny because I don't listen to the radio like the popular top 40 stations ever. I've never been that. Even as a high school kid, I never listened to it, but I just do. I feel like it's just my ear's drawn to, all of that. And every subject of jazz is, equally as appealing to me at times. I get, it kind of allows me the opportunity based on how my mood is at the time or what I wanted. I can listen to many things, be completely satisfied. That being said, I still love a lot of, what you might consider non-jazz music as well. I have favorite musicians of mine that maybe, but, they're not the people you might hear on the radio all the time. You know what I mean?
What was one of the first jazz shows that you saw live that really moved you and got you thinking, man, that's amazing? I saw
the University of Kansas jazz band, like their top big band. When we were in high school playing the KU Jazz Festival, we saw the top jazz band from KU play. That was probably the first thing I saw, like in a real, from a concert standpoint. And then not, then bigger than that, I would say Pat Metheny and Kenny Garrett at the Jazz Festival down at Crown Center. I'm trying to remember if it's where the ice rink is now. They had concerts there. I don't know if you remember that or you were here.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I don't remember the year, but Pat Metheny and Kenny Garrett were there the same year, I believe. And it was just, I'm pretty sure I didn't move. My jaw hit the ground for 30 minutes, and I don't remember blinking. but it was just, I was just going, whoa, what is this? And then, so that was probably really the thing. And, I could think of lots of those early on live performances I saw. I remember going to Michael Brecker at the Folly and seeing his quartet with James Genius and Joey Colarazzo and just being like, whoa. Matter of fact, I went to that concert when I was going to prom with my girlfriend. I made her go to the Majestic for dinner. Then we went to the Michael Brecker concert. Then we went to prom.
That's awesome. So if you could get into a jazz DeLorean and go back in time and punch in the digits and go anywhere, who are you going to see? Who would you see and where would you go?
I mean, it's going to sound like prefabricated, but I would have to say I'd go back to see and hang with Charlie Parker and just go be a part of that whole time period when things were shifting so much. I mean, there was a huge change in the music, and it happened fairly quickly, but it was an amazing time. And I would have to say that would be the time, the late 40s, early 50s. Is that fair?
Absolutely. So everything's going to come down to this. Everyone has a version or an interpretation of you, your family, your friends, your fans, colleagues, but you know yourself best. So tell me, who do you think you are?
Man, I'm a dad that plays saxophone, and I say dad that plays it because I'm a dad first before anything else, and a husband and a saxophone player and a friend, and ultimately I'm a fan of our city. To put it simply, I'm just me every day, and I'm my greatest saxophone player to be in Kansas, never, right? Do I aspire to be? No. Do I want to have an impact? Yes. I just want to continue doing what I do on a daily basis.
Perfect. That's a great way to wrap and sum everything up. Herschel, thanks for taking some time out. Thanks for being such a great part of this thriving Kansas City scene here in 2019. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, Joe. Thanks for the time.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in Kansas City and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Herschel for his time, his music, and his cool. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.